Conversation this morning, and coming in from a conversation around matters internal security and administration, quite a number of things to be able to look into and to understand how they all unfold. Sometimes time is just not enough, but still moving on with some of those conversations that we must keep front and center. And into that, we're going to be looking at still the pact deal and what it essentially means on towards the elections in 2027. And even as we do that, our guest for this hour already seated with us. And as we go into that, we will be talking this morning at this hour with Joshua Odhiambo Nyamori, who's a governance and policy expert, and he joins us in a hot seat this morning. Good morning, Joshua.
Good morning.
Karibu Sana to the hot seat of the Situation Room. We'll be talking about matters, untoward an election in 2027. Far be it from us to not have that conversation in 2025 because, for all intents and purposes, election fever is hotting up. So as we get into that, thank you for being here with us to do that today. We're going to welcome you to the Situation Room with today's proverb. CT goes to a different African country every week and comes back with proverbs. So he's going to share it for today, and we'd like you to interpret that for us and tell us how you would think about that. Right?
Great.
Okay.
To one who does not know, a small garden is a forest. Our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Gabonese Republic.
Okay.
Yes. An interesting country. Is Gabon in West Africa or in Central Africa?
He's asking you.
I'm asking both of you. Is it in West or is it in Central Africa?
Gabon, I think it should be Central Africa.
It is actually.
Yeah.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
You clearly paid attention during the geography lessons.
I left geography in Form 2, but I think I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah, so your proverb.
Let me repeat it. To one who does not know, a small garden is a forest.
I would want to relate it to a quote from Stalin. Mm-hmm. That without investigation, you should not speak. One who has not investigated has not speak. So basically, if you have not done your research and you don't have the right knowledge, then definitely a small obstacle looks so huge, and you will go around issues. But if you have done your research well, you have the knowledge, then you'd be precise on really what to tackle.
Indeed. Okay. Well, looking into that, I guess interpretations differ as the minds do.
Sure.
But some things are glaring and they hit you in the face almost when you get in touch with their reality. Let's look at what's happening currently politically when we see the pact between two parties. And just off the bat, between these two parties of ODM and UDA that took place on Friday, what does that mean when we look at it from a political point of view on towards an election that's happening in 2027? Because that's the question everybody's asking. What next, Joshua?
Yeah, I've seen and read different people giving different interpretations. Mm-hmm. But for me, it gives hope to this country. It gives hope because you need to look at it from the backdrop of June 2024, especially 24th, 25th of June, when our streets were chaotic. There was blood. Parliament was breached. Army was in the streets. And we didn't know what would happen to the country in another 2-3 days. It was possible that we could have gone Somalia, South Sudan, or even Sudan way, or Congolese way. So my view is that every time the political protagonists in Kenya come together, it stabilizes the politics of the country. It reduces the tension. And therefore, it also gives the country an opportunity to focus on certain issues that we are not able to deal with at the times when we are extremely divided. Yes, if you look at the history of this country, every time we have made progress in terms of reforms, it has been when the key protagonists have found convergence. And so I look at, you see, the IPPG, after just the no reforms, no elections riots. I look at, 2007, the NADCO process. I look at, the constitutional review process and so on and so forth. So I think it is an opportunity for the country. It is for us to take advantage of it.
Okay.
Yes.
How so? And is this coming together an answer? Because the thing is that when you look at a protest, there's usually an issue behind the protest. There's an issue that needs to be handled. Whether we look at protests that took place in Cuba, where people were complaining about the cost of transportation, whether you look at Egypt, where people were talking about, high cost of living in terms of the cost of food, there's usually an issue that brings about a protest. Now, if we're saying that there was an answer or a solution that was being brought, is the solution now in the coming together of these two political parties a solution to these issues that brought about this conflict in the first place?
Let me borrow a word from the title of the MOU, and that is framework. My view is that the coming together establishes a framework for the solution of the core problems. Because one, it enables the protagonists to sit down on a table and agree on the objectives that they want to achieve, and so that they can be able to discuss and tackle those issues and focus on the same vision and same objects. Without that, they'll be pulling apart. They will be fighting and tearing at each other. They'll be competing on who will, be the darling of the public. Some of these reforms sometimes require even taking very unpopular decisions. And at such times, when the political class is extremely divided, it is not possible for them to sit down and make those decisions. And then, there is a quote that I think is it's attributed to the story of Machiavelli in The Prince, where he said, can't remember the exact words, but an able statesman out of employment is like a big whale that will endeavor to destabilize the ship if not given a cask to play with. So I look at Honorable Raila Odinga as that big whale that you need to get busy doing something useful for the country. And Honorable Raila Odinga has played two kind of roles. One has been at moments a destabilizing factor in the country, and at other moments he has been a stabilizing factor. And when I talk about Raila Odinga, I'm not talking about Raila Odinga the person. I'm also talking about Raila Odinga and his restive constituency. So I'm thinking that a chance on the table to be able to sit down and discuss and find solutions is actually making good use of the energy, the intellect, the experience of such an able statesman.
Now, Joshua, as you talk about Raila Odinga coming together and being a point of stability in the government, and talk about this current MOU, the two of them, first of all, say this is not political. It is not cast in anything that is legally binding. And that notwithstanding, after Raila Odinga went to Kisii and he was heckled, a few days later he says, after signing the deal with government, opposition leader Raila Odinga sending mixed signals. He says, I did not go to the president came to me. What is he communicating to his constituency?
I think, again, the statement is open to different kind of interpretations. But I've tried to follow Raila Odinga for a long time. I remember I attended a rally in Kisumu when, President Moi came with the entire KANU platoon to, according to the mood of the country, to announce the merger between ODM and NDP. And then we sat at the stadium until almost 2 o'clock and we were wondering what is happening at State House. Has this thing aborted? When they came, it is Raila who, because he spoke before the president, he said that these guys have wanted us to join their house, but we are not going to join it because we still have certain issues that need to be resolved. And so he enumerated some of those issues. He talked about constitutional review process, he talked about land reform, he talks about the issue of inclusivity, and said that for that matter, they were moving from cooperation into partnership, and that they would discuss, the merger later. So for me, I think Raila Odinga, as a politician, moves cautiously to be able to still have the space to negotiate and to be able to manage his constituency, but at the same time expressing the view that it is not really for him, and that if they disagree, then they could separate. I think that is not wrong, because we shouldn't assume that if they come together, then completely Raila loses his capability to make decisions.
One would argue that Raila's latest pronouncements comes from the fact that he's a strong base for a very long time just went against him, and he now realizes that perhaps I need to go back to my position. But that notwithstanding as well, let's talk about what this does to the politics of 2027. Looks as though these leaders are coming together to secure their positions and not looking at what will benefit the monarchy, would you say?
I think 2027 is still far away. I mean, if you look at our elections, I was actively watching and probably involved in 1997, 2002, 2007, and the subsequent elections. And my view is that the winning coalitions are normally formed towards the end of the term. And that right now, NDP and KANU merged in 2000, I think 2000 or late 1999. But the pact was scuttled just a few months to the 2002 elections. So my view is that this cannot define 2027. Mm-hmm. And it should not define 2027.
But doesn't it though? I'm sorry. Doesn't it though? This is exactly what it does. That it does define 2027. That all of these moves are not being made because somebody wants to see a change happen on a random Tuesday. That these pacts are being made so that it will influence the choices that Kenyans will make as to who is elected in 2027. Because can we see that there's a direct correlation between the pact that's being made between these two parties and the needs that are resident in the hearts and minds of Kenyans today? I'm hard-pressed to see that connection, and I would like somebody to paint that picture and bring it to life for me to actually see that these parties coming together, this is how it's going to affect Kenyans, 1, 2, 3, 4, or that their interests are actually top of mind when they do come together. If anything, political expediency, check. Making sure that you're still in the pool when the selection is being made, check. Also making sure that somebody remembers your name by being seated in the front seat then when these pacts are actually being done, check. I don't see that Kenyans and their needs and their livelihoods being protected are front and center when these pacts are being made. So for me, it is about 2027 elections, is it not?
I think it is Adam Smith who said that it is not for the generosity of the butcher that we have our stake on the dinner table. Every politician has, short and long-term interests. And definitely anybody who is in power, the most important thing is that he stays in power. But for him to stay in power, he needs to implement certain, policies that they committed to the people. Those out of power would always want to get into power. Okay, so to that extent, you might say that then there are political interests to it. But in my view, right now, for the president especially, it might not necessarily be 2027. It will most likely be that parliament is stable and the streets are quiet.
Parliament is stable, that
And
he
this-
has numbers from the opposition.
Yes, because anybody who is in office and who has legislation to pass, who have policies to be approved by Parliament, will need numbers in Parliament. I think we will be very naive to think a president will just sit pretty and see his numbers in Parliament whittling away and be comfortable that after all I will negotiate with the Parliament. All over the world, those who are ruling will always want to secure a comfortable majority. If they cannot have them in their own party, then they would come into an arrangement, a coalition, on a cooperation with certain parties who are not in power, so that they are able to secure the process of making decisions.
That's exactly how coalitions exist all over the world.
Exactly.
Because somebody wants to be in a position where they are the ones who call the shots and they can't do it alone. So they look for someone whom they can partner with. And in the process of partnering, there's divide and share.
Yeah.
Yes.
And during that period, there are certain issues that can then be pushed that are important to the people. For instance, some of the issues that have been talked about in NADCO, but also in the MOU, are things that are critical to this country. The issues on electoral justice, they're critical issues that we need to look at. But we are not able to look at them when Parliament is so divided that they are not able to agree on anything. Okay, issues to do with devolution, taking money down to the counties, is important. But we will need, the politicians to be speaking from the same language, both in the National Assembly and in Parliament. We will need people at the Treasury to be able to give proposals that make sense and that speak to that. Otherwise, they will always find a reason for not, pursuing those objectives.
But Joshua, theoretically speaking, what you say is very true, that there have to be some form of consensus. Unfortunately, the consensus that we see doesn't always favor the citizenry.
Like I said, politicians have their own selfish interest.
They
and
do.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Oh,
it is. I don't
there's
think
everything wrong with that, Joshua.
let me tell you, without selfish interest, there are very, very few politicians who would take the risk. Politics is not an easy thing. Politics is expensive in time, energy, and resources. And therefore, definitely...
Is it voluntary or is it forced?
Definitely. And that's why I'm telling you, even volunteers, there is normally something that they are pursuing. Indeed, at a number of times, some of those selfish interests then converge with, the common interest.
Give me an example where selfish interest has converged and suddenly metamorphosized into public interest.
I give you an example. Allow me to give you an example outside the country.
Mm-hmm.
Please, even two.
Yeah. Abraham Lincoln was, in that election where he became president, one of the least expected to become president. He had stronger, opponents and rivals. And so in that election, when he managed to, find himself elected, and America then got into a serious crisis, the war.
The Civil War.
Yeah, the Civil War. And he could not prosecute it alone. He needed stability of the country. He still needed to be president. He had certain, things that he wanted to achieve. For instance, the emancipation issue. But he couldn't do it without his rivals. What did he do? He called on his rivals. And his three key rivals, he gave them key cabinet position. Secretary for State. He gave them the Treasury. And I can't remember the third one.
But was it not clear? You've stated it here that it was very clear what he wanted to do.
Indeed.
And he was bringing in his rivals as a means to an end.
Indeed.
Because the emancipation of slaves was a big issue for him.
Indeed.
So it was not for him to come and be president again, but it was to make sure that hundreds of thousands of people could actually be free. I'm trying to draw the parallel between bringing in rivals and giving them key cabinet positions or key positions in government to allow this thing that he wanted to do to become a reality. And here where we say bring people together so that I can be president again in 2027, or so that I can have a position in government in 2027. What are the issues that we are seeing? For example, that these two parties come together and we say, because they've come together and as a result of that, 1 will happen, 2 will happen, 3 will happen.
I look at June 2024, 25th. President William Ruto was the head of state.
He's still
yes. The country was falling apart. Okay? He definitely, I believe his team must have, painted scenarios on what could happen. One scenario was, I think, the mistake that was made to tell the army to move into the streets. I think it was a mistake.
Why do you think it was a mistake, Joshua?
I think it was a mistake because you cannot control the army. I mean, it was not the first time we are seeing the army in the streets in Kenya. We saw it in 1982. It is not the first time we were seeing it in other countries. And once they get out of the streets, you are not sure when they will
whether they'll go back to the barracks.
Yes. And whether you will control them as
So what did that signify to you, that the army had to come to the streets?
Definitely we were at, the point of a precipice. The country was almost falling apart. It found me in the CBD. And so I was able to see from the rooftop, firsthand what was happening. And I cried for my country. And I wondered whether grass will still be green the following day, okay, whether the sun would rise. But so at that moment, as a political leader, the foremost political leader of the country, definitely you have the selfish agenda to sustain yourself in office. But then you also have a responsibility to give leadership to the country. He could have dismissed everybody and stayed in power and faced the kind of things that we are seeing in South Sudan and other countries. He opted to reach out to, across the aisle and talk with his rivals. I think that is important, and for me, I want to urge Kenyans to take a long-term view of some of these things. That we have. When I was young, I thought we could turn the country upside down and change all the mess and have the.
Have you changed that view?
I have done. I think I have. City. I think you've known me for a long time.
I've known you for a very long time. Yes.
You knew me as an ardent street
revolutionary.
Yes. But I have gotten to the point. I followed. It is Winston Churchill who said that if at 20 you are not an idealist, then you have no heart. But if at 40 you are not a realist, then you have no brain. I think over the years, experience has tempered with my idealism. I'm at the point where I realize that we can, progressively reform the country.
Looking at reform, and we're going to go to a break in just a minute, but Joshua, just on that point, that there's a lot that needs reform. There's so many things. If we just look at the issues that people cry about on a daily basis, that's enough to fuel some kind of reform. I am still hard pressed, and you seem to be pretty optimistic about this MOU or this pact between these two parties. But I still need this picture to be painted in large brushstrokes and brought to reality in terms of what can we see will happen to quell the cries of Kenyans because of this pact, because of this MOU. And that from practice, we see that implementation is the bane of governance. Will we see that these things are actually implemented?
It is upon us as the civil society. It's upon us as the people to, keep pressure on the leaders to focus on the bigger picture. It is possible that they can get comfortable. So it is important that we do ensure that they do not get comfortable, but it is important that we support moves that they are making towards progress. Because if we do not do that, we are the ones to lose. My view is that, if you look at the 10 points that they talked about, there are things that are critical. I mean, we need to talk about inclusivity in this country. You look at access to water in Kiambu, and you look at it in Marandera. Look at the number of kilometers in Marsabit and the number of kilometers in Nairobi. There's definitely something to talk about in terms of inclusivity. So we need to see it reduced into budgets. We need to see it reduced into policy documents. We need to see it reduced into, government spending and so on and so forth. We need to see them reduced into laws and so on. For that to happen, we need leadership.
Yeah.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for us, and that is why we need a united front of the political groups that we have in the country.
Right.
I will still urge, by the way, the two leaders, that they still need to reach out even to those who still remain outside. I mean, people don't have to leave their parties, but they need to focus on these 10 issues, push these 10 issues to ensure that at least we get some of them achieved. I'm sure we are not going to get 100%, but we should be comfortable that we attain a certain percentage.
Governance and policy expert Joshua Odhiambo Nyamore is our guest this hour, and we're looking at this pact between the two parties of ODM and UDA and what it means towards 2027. Joshua believes it's not just about 2027 because that's far off, and that things can actually be done now, and that there's time to push for those things. We'll come back and we'll interrogate this just a little bit more. It's 26 minutes to 9 o'clock. We'll take a quick look at weather and traffic and be back after this.
We value your feedback and welcome your comments, queries, and complaints regarding our content. You can get in touch with us via SMS on 22151. Call 0719-012450 or 0719-012090 or email feedback@standardmedia.co.ke. Our PO Box number is 30080-00100, Nairobi, or deliver it to our offices at Standard Group Center, Mombasa Road, Nairobi.
On Club Kiboko. I'm told you have to hold on these tightly and you don't let them go.
This is what I'm talking about right here on Straight Up Show.
Pop Francis or Pop Colimo na Pop Male le ma bro.
I am not a woman.
Nini tena nyabuto ni nini?
In marriage, having somebody who understands you in all season is very important.
I'd rather have bad times with you than good times with someone else.
Subscribe to the Smarter Bundle today. Dial *544# or visit My Airtel app. Airtel Smarter Bundle. Browse, chat, call. Airtel Money. Airtel, a reason to imagine.
Doing that, give or take, right? We're in March 2025. The next election will happen in August 2027. You know, all things remaining constant. So we're looking give or take January because people are just now, it's full throttle campaigns. So about 18 months that these 10 points will actually be addressed. And mind you, we're looking at some big items here. corruption, reduce it significantly, make sure that counties are accountable when it comes to the monies that they do or do not spend, making sure that young people, or anybody for that matter, are not disappeared, making sure that the right to protest and to meet and all of that is actually secured in Kenya today. It's implementation of the NADCO report. These are big issues, and we're talking about 18 months.
In 2010, just before, just a day or two after the draft constitution was made public, I remember we sat down as members of civil society somewhere, and there was indication that both principals may have not been very keen on giving their support. In fact, if you go back to your records, you'll find that it took about 2 or so days before they gave their support to the draft. It took the civil society to reach out to them. It took the civil society to make calls in public. But it does not mean that they had never been committed to the constitutional review process. They were. But along the way, there were certain fears that emerged as they looked at the draft that came out of the COE. So my view is that we have this window of opportunity. We can choose to dismiss it and say that it cannot work. So let's not give them, let's not support them. Let's not give them a chance, because in any case, nothing has ever worked. But we have known that certain things have worked during times of crisis. So my view is, as a country, we need to look at those issues, what we think are important, support and push, okay? Allow them to give and take and to compromise until we are able to achieve. We can't achieve all those that they set out, but I believe we can achieve some of them. Yes. The amount that we'll achieve will depend on, the goodwill that is there, whether they will continue to work together, and whether we as Kenyans stay on course.
Joshua,
and it is at very difficult times.
Joshua,
Dr. Muga.
What is it about these two leaders that convinces you that they have the wherewithal and the capacity to actually take the citizenry of this country and shape this government so that it actually does what a government is supposed to do for its people? What is it about these two?
The two of them in 2022 brought together about 14 million people in terms of votes. The difference between the two of them were only 200,000 votes. Definitely, both of them have lost certain support, but the whatever support they still have, they can be able to pull them together. Why am I saying this? You realize that the situation in the streets changed immediately. Raila made an indication that he does not support the street protests, and he asked that also you want William Ruto to leave. Then what? That changed the paradigm. Okay, so it meant that even amongst the Gen Zs, there was a certain group amongst them that listened to their leader, and leaders have influence. Okay, so Raila comes with a political influence that he has built over the years. Okay, then William Ruto is head of government. He has the government structures. He also has his political structures and the political support basis. My view is that they need to pull those together, and they will need to invite any other political groupings that are still out.
You're speaking like a politician. Let me rephrase my question.
Yes.
What qualities do these two leaders have beyond their ability to be astute politicians that would ensure that this country is governed? Being a politician doesn't make you a good manager. The country right now requires itself to be steered in a direction that will guarantee that these resources we talk about that we have, and indeed we do have them, that it actually works for the betterment of the citizenry, and that this economy actually grows. Qualities that they have that would guarantee the governance, that would bring in the prosperity, that would lessen the poverty, that would ensure that the apathy that we feel and the dejection that the citizenry feel and this dollop of mistrust that is there is reduced. What is it that these two have?
As well as, let me just add on that. You say that these two leaders have come together to pool their support. They're pulling their support to remain in power, not to save this, to address issues about the citizens. We talk about Gen Z, them pulling out because they listen to them. No, it's because they're intimidated by the police.
I don't think so. I don't think that it is the police that pulled a significant part of Gen Z out of the road.
I agree. I agree with you on that.
Yeah,
note.
the police, the Gen Z actually overran the police. And so my view is that there is a certain part of the Gen Z that listened to their political leadership and pulled out of the streets. If it is only technocrats that we required, then we would have looked for Martino Duro Tieno.
Joshua.
Just listen to me. Just listen to me.
No.
In political decisions. Because the country is moved forward through political decisions. You in political decisions, especially that require numbers, whether it is numbers in legislation in parliament, or whether it is numbers in terms of the public support, you basically
Joshua, you set your own exam, so you're definitely going to pass it.
You basically
you have your own marking scheme, so Joshua, you know what I'm asking.
Yeah.
You see, when you have a leader in the position, a political leader in the position of a president, they put across policies. They ensure those policies are followed, and the result of those policies are what brings about the things that we all want. If you say there are policies and we are told they've been implemented and one doesn't see the changes that were promised, and this goes on, then it points to an inability. I am asking the question again. What is it about the two that will ensure, because we don't need new policies, we have policies already.
We have policies. We have had dysfunctional governance structures for many years, not only within the last 2 or 3 years. This is a country in which President Uhuru had at some point to come out in public and allow police to come back to the streets because the police sabotaged what they were trying to do with the NTSA. You remember that? This is a country in which it is said that when the police commissioner Nyaseda tried to bring reforms, then the police system actually sabotaged him. And he had to be thrown out. So what am I saying is that a number of these decisions that are to be made are decisions that would go contrary to the processes as they have been moving, to the things that are as they have been working. The president definitely needs political support for that. Okay, and I think for me that is what Raila Odinga brings. But at the same time, I think the fact that that they are able to sit down to make this decision is critical for me.
But I don't disagree with that.
Yes.
I am a huge proponent of the Kenyan political class's ability to talk and to agree.
Yes.
It is a wonderful, wonderful thing. It is not that. It's what happens after the talking and the agreement. Our lived experience has been some benefit can be seen, but it's beyond the peace. Peace is good. You can't just eat it, but peace is good. What you eat is development and growth and the expansion of wealth to everybody. That's what you eat. So I'm saying beyond the peace, we can see the peace, we understand it, and it is a very good thing. It is an excellent thing. And it's something that our neighbors could take a leaf from us and borrow. But beyond that, there is the need for the country to actually move forward economically.
Yes.
I'll give you an example. The housing levy is a very unpopular levy, isn't it? However, as a student of economics, I would tell you that construction economics has been economics that has been applied to ensure that money circulates Okay, and because when you spend money on construction, then it pays not only the contractor, it pays suppliers, it pays laborers, it pays those who manufacture the steel and the cement, and then this would translate to the taxi drivers and matatus and so on and so forth. So the more construction you do in a country, the more the money would circulate. However, because this money to finance construction of housing must come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. The only other option that the government had was to get it from payslips. It couldn't get it. We couldn't borrow to build houses. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now to get that money from payslip, it is an unpopular decision.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's unpopular, Joshua?
It is unpopular because it is pinching into our.
Is that the only reason why it's unpopular?
It probably part of the problem could be communication.
What else apart from communication?
Tell me if there's any other. But for me, I think the most important thing is because it is pinching into the payslips. But the other thing is that a number of majority of Kenyans have not understood how they would directly or indirectly benefit
them understand?
The government. There you go. Now, the kind of communication that is needed is a political communication. Technocrats cannot make that communication. Actually, and I think you are brought, I have watched, I follow you very keenly, and you have brought technocrats here to talk about the housing levy. But they talk about it, they try to explain it, but they
don't understand it themselves.
You can't give what you don't have.
No. I don't think we lack an
explanation, because if it was clearly understood in terms of how it's supposed to play out, it wouldn't be so difficult to explain. We've had many different explanations from different people who are in government
on the same subject.
The same subject from practitioners, whether it is the Ministry of Lands, whether it is housing.
I have followed your discussions. I think the confusion that arises is that there were discussions that were held prior to the enactment of Affordable Housing Act, and then there were discussions that were held after the Affordable Action Act. The frameworks are extremely different. For instance, on the issue of the financing, previously it was a contribution, it was a saving, but after the act, it was it is a tax. Okay, so all this would need the political structures to be able to understand it and communicate it and agree to communicate it, because as it is being communicated now, there are certain political groups that decide to misinterpret it. Yeah.
How can you possibly misinterpret this matter? Really?
Yeah.
Is why I asked Joshua.
Yes.
When you think of the subject of housing, it is a wonderful subject. It is a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. Governments all over the world have attempted to do this. Yeah. You create or you build houses that make it possible for people who don't earn high incomes to also have decent dwellings.
True.
Okay? And they are usually very highly subsidized. Okay?
Sure.
We've had that in this country for a very long time. They were called municipal housing. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. It's a good idea. I like the idea. Mm-hmm. But what is difficult about communicating and saying, we want to build these houses, we will tax you, this is how it's going to go. Mm-hmm. It's the same discussion you can ask with the Shah issue that we keep talking about. Mm-hmm. Explaining it. Even if the explanation is difficult, explain it. There'll be noise, but you have said it. If you do not hit it on the head when you should, and you vacillate and you go back and forth, then you create mistrust. And it was completely unnecessary.
Dr. Muga, that is why it is important that the masses listen to their political leaders more than they listen to the technocrats. And that is why it is important that the political leadership pull together and speak one language. You get what I'm saying?
No, I don't.
Because without that, the technocrats can come here and explain it 10 times. But the public will not listen.
It's got to be within the interest of the said politician to actually see these things
The
happen.
technocrats implement these things, Joshua.
That's their job.
How
They
do
will
you
do
implement
that.
something you don't understand and you can't explain with clarity?
I don't think. I've been listening to the discussions that have been going on here. Even the people you have hosted, I've watched very closely when you hosted the PS. I've watched when you hosted other people. There's the MP was the architect. The MP from Kisii.
He's called Manduku.
Manduku.
Yes.
Talked very, very eloquently about the issue. But the issue is, so long as the politicians in the streets are still speaking a different language, the masses will listen to the politician, not listen to the technocrat.
Yeah.
You get me?
I see.
Yeah.
And this is the
I have
message.
understood you.
I mean, very clear on what you're saying, but I still go back to what I'm saying in terms of if it is not within the interest of said politician for people to actually have a house, for example, or for people to be able to walk into hospital and get the care that they need. If that's not the primary interest, I can say anything up here. And so long as the peace has been brokered, we're done. But that's the next step after that, to see the actual implementation of these things, I think is what has a lot of people worried today. That, okay, because you've come together, are we actually going to see the fruits of this coming together?
We need to continuously engage.
What is going to ensure that the birth of the baby after this marriage is going to be something that will benefit Kenyans? And that's where, the rubber meets the road. Who's insisting?
As well as engagement does not mean coming together in a marriage. Opposition had its role in making sure that the policies put in place by the government are actually achieved. They didn't have to come together.
Interestingly, I think there's a discussion that you even have on this table that we do not have an opposition. Okay, we only have minority and majority.
That particular it has been postulated by very many people.
Yes, but then my point is that as I told you, some of these things require numbers in parliament and numbers in the streets.
Even when it's not in the interest of the people.
No. But the issues we are talking about. Tell me anything amongst the 10 points that are not in the interest of the people.
That's
the
the
issue
point.
of inclusivity is
That's
in the
the point, that it's been hidden right
Yes.
there in plain sight. And that's
Now-
what we're
now-
saying,
now,
that
I
you can
wanna-
come to me and you can hoodwink me
Yeah.
to make me think that you actually are interested in what affects me as a citizen, Dennis as a citizen, yourself, Joshua, or CT. But the question is beyond the 10 points, beyond the razzmatazz at KICC, beyond the documentation where people even announced it but essentially pulled themselves away from its responsibility, beyond coming together and saying, here we are, I do or I do.
You remember me
What
talking?
happens after that?
You-
Because that's what's going to let us know whether you were interested in saying it so that we look at you and say, this is fantastic, or us actually seeing that these things will actually be implemented.
You remember me talking about Adam Smith's quote of, it is not in the interest of the selfish interest of the butcher that we have,
A stake on the table.
Yes. My point is, whatever the interest would be, President William Ruto's interest could be that he finishes the first time he gets re-elected. Raila Odinga's interest could be that, he is involved in government, even though he was not declared the president. And probably he continues to sustain himself, even despite his advanced age in government and in politics. That could be their selfish interest. However, in pushing those selfish interests, they have advanced and proclaimed, points that are important for us. And it is upon us to then ensure that we push them along those lines. If by implementing what we want, President Ruto then convinces us to re-elect him, so be it. If Raila Odinga is to be close to government for the next 2 years, but we are able to deal with issues of leadership and integrity, so be it. You get me? So long as we are able to achieve our goals. However, if we are to say that it really doesn't matter what those politicians want, for us as Kenyans, this is what we want, I mean, how are we going to effect them? I mean, are we going to go to church and the mosques and pray about them and hope that we will wake up the following day and realize that there's no corruption in the country, that there's inclusivity in budgetary design and implementation, that there is no ethnicity?
But isn't it important that Kenyans are actually able to call these things out and say that we see what this looks like to us? You have a position to either convince me that you're serious or stop this charade, because that's the thing. And I think that should we go to church or mosque to pray? Not necessarily, but the responsibility to actually call out and say we can actually see what it is that you're doing, because we've seen it before. It's not the first time people have come together and promised heaven and earth. What's going to make sure this time is different?
And that's why I'm saying we need to engage as Kenyans. And engaging does not mean that we necessarily support everything they want. The engaging means that we support what is positive and what will deliver our interests as a public, and we call them out when it is important to call them out. But at the same time, there is a problem in the country. And the problem is a problem of negativity. That we have reached a point, and I don't blame Kenyans for that. As you said, over the years, things have not worked. So that Kenyans do not believe that anything will work, especially if it is led by politicians. So my view is that we cannot afford to lose hope. We cannot afford to lose hope.
We're actually not that negative.
Yeah.
If you look at the crowds that attend functions, it tells you we still believe. It's just that we have been let down so often. We appear like we don't believe, but Kenyans still expect some good to come out of the political leadership.
You agree with me that if you and I went to Kibra or Mathare and start speaking about this issue, we hardly get 10 people around.
What 10? I mean, you might even not live their life.
Exactly. But then when William Ruto and Raila Odinga go to those places, they pull crowds, and those crowds are able to, stand there and listen to them. And that is what we need to use. That is a resource that we need to use positively. We cannot dismiss it and say that it is unnecessary and that we are not going to use it, and because we have been disappointed previously, therefore we want to try and do it alone. Okay? There is a theory by a guy called Robust. I think it was I've forgotten the exact name, but it's about a theory of innovation. And the theory says that there are about 4 or 5 categories of people. The first category is it's called Everett, Robert Everest. The first category are the innovators. The innovators may have very good ideas, but they can't take them anywhere. So the technocrats you are talking about, they could have very good ideas, but the masses cannot believe them. The next category are the characters like President William Ruto and Right Honorable Raila Odinga. They do not have the time to think about it, but they see selfish interest in those agenda, and they pick those agenda. They go out there. They have people within the file and ranks of their groups who will listen to them when they speak. Okay? That is the early majority. And then there is the late majority that will follow because, the early majority, it has become a craze. You get me?
I get you.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the discourse is necessary, and I think that you come to a place whereby you continue to have this kind of discourse, and then it leads to 2 things: people keep talking or people do something about it. And I think that's at the point where we are at now. Governance and policy expert Joshua Odhiambo Nyamori has been our guest this hour, and I want to thank you so much for being here with us, helping us push these conversations that are necessary to have every day. Asante sana.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. It's 9 a.m.